You stepped into a cold shower this morning, you gasped, your chest tightened, and for about 20 minutes afterward, you genuinely felt sharper. Then, somewhere around your second meeting, the fog rolled back in. You've been doing this for weeks now, maybe months, and you keep waiting for it to become the fix you were promised, the habit that would finally make your mornings feel like they belong to you. It hasn't. Not fully. And there is a precise biological reason why. Cold exposure does something real to your body. That part is not in question. What is in question is what problem it's actually solving, and what problem it was never built to solve. Here's what happens the moment cold water hits your skin. Your sympathetic nervous system fires. Norepinephrine floods your bloodstream, sometimes rising several 100% above baseline within minutes. Andrew Huberman at Stanford University has documented this response extensively. His work shows that this norepinephrine surge is genuinely capable of producing sharp increases in alertness, focus, and mood, and that the effect can last for hours in some cases. So if you felt that jolt of clarity after your cold shower, you were not imagining it. Your instinct to reach for that habit was correct. The alertness is real. The mechanism is real. This is not a case of a popular wellness trend built on nothing, but alertness and circadian alignment are not the same system. And this is the distinction almost nobody makes for you. Your morning grogginess, the fog you're trying to cut through with cold water, is not primarily a norepinephrine problem. It is a timing problem. Specifically, it is a problem with where your internal clock believes you are in your day, regardless of what the actual clock on your wall says. Russell Foster at the University of Oxford has spent decades studying how your circadian system receives its primary timing signal. That signal is light, hitting a specific population of cells in your retina called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells do not contribute to your visual image of the world at all. Their only job is to report light intensity directly to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock sitting in your hypothalamus. This is the single strongest lever your body has for shifting from internal night into internal day. Not adrenaline, not temperature shock, light. Here is the mechanism most people never connect to their morning fog. Overnight, your body produces melatonin, the hormone that signals internal night to essentially every cell you have. Melatonin doesn't just make you sleepy. It suppresses the systems responsible for daytime alertness, including your cortisol rhythm. Cortisol is supposed to rise sharply within the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking. Researchers call this the cortisol awakening response, and it is one of the most reliable markers of a well-timed circadian system. When that response is blunted, you get exactly the sensation you've been trying to cold shower your way out of. A groggy, half-arrived feeling that adrenaline can mask for 20 minutes, but cannot actually correct. A cold shower spikes norepinephrine. It does almost nothing to suppress melatonin or accelerate your cortisol awakening response, because those systems are governed by light exposure timing, not by thermal shock. You are essentially using a powerful, real tool to treat a symptom, while the actual driver of that symptom continues completely unaddressed on the other side of your still-closed curtains. This is why the fog returns. You never solved the timing mismatch. You just borrowed 20 minutes of chemical alertness against a debt your circadian system was still carrying. There is a second layer here, and it involves temperature in a completely different way than you'd expect. Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies has mapped how your core body temperature follows its own circadian rhythm, dropping to its lowest point roughly 2 hours before your natural wake time, then rising steadily across the morning as part of your body's transition into full daytime alertness. This temperature rise is not incidental. It is one of several parallel signals, alongside cortisol and melatonin suppression, that your body uses to confirm that daytime has arrived. A cold shower does something almost paradoxical to this system. Immediately after cold exposure, your core temperature actually drops further before your body mounts a rebound response and pushes it back up, sometimes overshooting your baseline. If this is timed appropriately against your natural temperature rhythm, that rebound can genuinely support your body's transition into daytime mode. But if you're cold showering while your core temperature and cortisol rhythm are still lagging behind because you haven't had adequate light exposure, you're asking a downstream signal to do the work of an upstream one. The rebound has less circadian scaffolding to build on. It produces the jolt without producing the alignment. Think of it the way you'd think about decanting a wine that hasn't had time to breathe. You can shock it with aeration, swirl it aggressively, force oxygen into it fast. You'll get some opening, some immediate change in the nose. But a wine that needed slow, unhurried contact with air to reveal its actual structure will still taste tight and closed underneath that surface change. The shock doesn't replace the process. It just gives you a louder version of wherever the wine already was. So the shift here is not to abandon the cold shower. If it genuinely helps you feel alert and you enjoy it, there's no biological reason to give it up. The shift is to stop expecting it to do a job that belongs to light, and to sequence it correctly so it can actually support the transition your body is already trying to make, rather than working against a rhythm that hasn't been triggered yet. Here's what that looks like tomorrow morning. Before you touch the cold water, get outside, or at minimum, get yourself in front of a bright window for 5 to 10 minutes, within the first 30 minutes of waking. This is the signal that actually begins suppressing melatonin and accelerating your cortisol awakening response. It costs you nothing extra. It simply has to happen first. Then take your cold shower, if you want it, ideally within that same first hour. At that point, your core temperature and cortisol are already beginning their natural rise, and the norepinephrine spike and temperature rebound from the cold exposure will be layering on top of a system that's already moving in the right direction, rather than trying to substitute for one that isn't moving at all. You stepped into a cold shower again this morning, and this time, the sharpness didn't fade by your second meeting because for once, the water wasn't doing all the work alone. Your clock had already been told it was morning. The cold was just confirming what your body already knew. If you want a structured way to get your circadian signals working with each other, instead of against each other, the 15-minute sleep shift walks through exactly how to sequence your light, temperature, and wind-down cues each day and night. You can find it at 15minutesleepshift.com. What part of your morning routine do you think is doing less than you've assumed? Tell me below.